It's interesting to me how many of my gay friends love that horror, and not only love modern horror, but they're diehard longtime horror fans. I find this especially interesting because, for many, many years, the community has either been fetishized or ostracized in the genre. Yet still, those gays love that horror. Well, lately, there have been quite a few horror films that don't highlight the oddity of something other than the hetero experience. One of them is Hypochondriac, a film about the horrors of mental illness that just so happens to be occurring with a gay man. Let's discuss. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. I'll be at C2E2, the Chicago Comics and Entertainment Expo at the McCormick Place just south of downtown Chicago this year. I'm setting up shop in Artists Alley at table W5. So if you're in the Chicago area and want to check out some cool horror comics, swing by my table where I am premiering a new comic compilation of some horror short stories, young and old. It's called Scaries, and it'll be available only at C2E2 this year. Come by the booth, check out my comics, and let's chat about horror. I hope to see you there. Hypochondriac is new in select theaters, on demand, and digital download from XYZ Films. It's directed and written by Addison Heimann. Will, played by Zach Villa, works for a high-end pottery business, and in the opening moments when his coworker is having a panic attack, he shows he knows a thing or two about mental health by calming her down. Turns out Will's mother, played by Marlene Forte, suffered from a nonspecific mental illness, most likely schizophrenia, and attempted to kill him when he was a child. Not long after, his mother was put into an institution, never to be seen again by Will and his aloof and distracted father, played by Chris Dubeck. Now 30 years old, Will finds himself in a newish relationship with a cool guy named Luke, played by Devin Gray, who would like to take things to a more serious level. Unfortunately, a phone call from his long-lost mother triggers a mental breakdown in Will. He begins feeling phantom pains in his arms. He suffers from blackouts. And worse yet, he keeps seeing a terrifying man in a wolf costume who torments his waking and sleeping hours. As his symptoms intensify, the world Will has built around him begins to crumble. Hypochondriac is one of the best films depicting a not-so-slow descent into madness. Usually, in descent into madness films, there's a tendency to rush through things to get from the normal to the Lulu Cuckoo land because, let's face it, that's the most interesting part. But because of the trauma he suffered and most likely blocked out from his past, a trauma we experience early on in the film in a wonderfully uncomfortable scene between Will and his mom, this mental break is much more believable. It helps that Zach Villa is an extremely likable protagonist. He asks all the right questions to himself. Though he is terrified, he also seeks out help. And while at first he is told that it is most likely psychosomatic symptoms, otherwise known as an illness caused by one's own mind, his persistence and desire to seek help actually is what saves him. Sure, he does a lot of damage while he is suffering from these problems to his life and those around him, but if there is a helpful message to be gleaned from Hypochondriac, it is that seeking help is the best thing you can do in this situation. And man, is this situation ever horrifying. Through some wonderfully macabre and terrifying imagery, the viewer sees through Will's eyes as his mind begins to shatter. The Donnie Darko-esque wolf creature that Will hallucinates is very, very scary, especially the way it blends into the darkness and then quickly emerges from it, and then pops up in your face. It's an old-school scare trick, but director Addison Heimann makes it work every time. There's an especially arduous sequence where the wolf creature influences Will to reach into a lit kiln that is absolutely mortifying. Hypochondriac is filled with moments that bring to life what so many people suffer from every day. This is obviously a film that comes from a very vivid and personal vision and experience. Some will take umbrage towards the intimate look at a gay relationship in Hypochondriac. If you do have a problem with it, fine. Just please don't litter my comments section with them. It is 2022, and seeing two men kiss really isn't all that shocking anymore. But the gay is simply presented as a part of Will's life. It's an aspect of him, but not the focus of the movie. This isn't a film that tries to push some kind of agenda. It just shows a complex and troubled relationship that is threatened by mental illness. The two people in this relationship just happen to be gay. There is a quite explicit sex scene towards the end that I think might have gone a bit too far. This isn't because I objected to it morally, I just don't think it really added anything to the movie. I'd call out a hetero sex scene if it felt out of the blue and unnecessary in a horror film meant to be taken seriously. So just to be crystal clear to those reactionaries out there, the sexual acts are fine, but the placement of the scene does seem a little bit extreme and simply going for shock value. Hypochondriac is wonderfully acted on all fronts. Marlene Forte plays her extreme part hysterically but believably. Her rants on the phone with Will are unhinged, and you can understand how this might be chipping away at his psyche. I really like the distanced yet caring relationship between Will and his father, played by Chris Dubeck. Dubeck might seem calloused and aloof, but it seems that years of dealing with mental illness in his family has made him that way, and he knows exactly what to say to provide some tough love to Will in his time of need, even though it might seem cold at first. It's a complex role that Dubeck pulls off very well. If there's a true innocent victim in all this, it is Devon Gray's Luke, who simply wants to love Will, but he conveys a person who is coping with the decision to stay with a person falling apart or simply leave. Gray's solid acting is not only the rock Will can lean on, but it's one of the few voices of compassion and sanity heard. But the movie wouldn't be what it is without the tormented and tragic performance by Zach Villa as Will. The actor conveys so much emotion and creates such a well-rounded character. He shuffles through a Rolodex of emotion capably and believably all the way through. It truly is a remarkable lead performance. I don't know if the filmmaker suffers from this debilitating ailment or knows someone who does, but Hypochondriac is an unsensationalized and accurate depiction of mental illness and refuses to end it on some kind of over-saccharinated note. The realism of the final moments is undercut by a rather generic recovery montage, but the final scene communicates the message that though you can't deny mental illness, you can still live with it. Hypochondriac is one of the few movies that works as a positive message about mental illness and also functions as a pretty harrowing horror film.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're doomed. God doomed. Live the life that you are meant to be. Live inside that